Sure. From the formation of migration preference in the other room and the policy misconceptions that you heard about in this room, we'll move to what are alternatives to migration. This will be presented by our colleague Michel from the University of Luxembourg and myself. And we talk about specifically two elements. Michel will be talking about a randomized control trial in Senegal that focuses on entrepreneurial coaching and what this means for migration intention. I will be talking in particular about a study of the EU Emergency Trust Fund for Africa. And then, of course, we will talk a little bit about policy implications and have time for your questions, and our answers or answers from the rest. So why do we study alternatives to migration? I think for all of you, the answer should be fairly obvious. But one important finding also from previous projects is most people do not want to migrate. In some African countries, this rate is relatively low by global standards, but still most people would prefer if they could stay with the people they love in the conditions they like. We've seen examples of this with Marie Laurence's keynote this morning, for example. And if you think about development researchers such as Admetlla and his idea of development, then the absence of a feeling that you have to leave the country would be considered also an important development success for countries. If you talk to someone from Ireland, for example, very often they will tell you that this really was a change to how people think about their country, from transition from an emigration to a migration country, and that is important for your welfare. So enabling people to choose between domestic opportunities and migrating is important and, in our view, crucial for irregular migration potentially. And what we want to do here is present research on how we study key elements in this policy tool. With this, I hand over to Michel.
Thank you, Tobias. So the first part of this session is about two projects with the same global aim. So the first project that we conducted at the University of Luxembourg with some colleagues, Arnaud Bourguin, Melissa Tornari, and Elizabeth is over there. And it's an RCT, a randomized control trial that we conducted in Senegal. So why in Senegal? Because it's a very interesting context to study this type of labor market intervention. So first of all, it's a country in which you have a lot of very high migration intentions, especially among the youngs. And this is also a hub for irregular migration. So you have a lot of irregular migration, undocumented migration, starting from different places, including Dakar, when we conducted this RCT. And this is in connection with some difficult economic situation over there with high unemployment among the youth. So in fact, what we wanted to do is that this combination of high migration intention and high unemployment raises the case of maybe the impact of to try to capture the impact of labor market intervention at origin and how it's going to affect these intentions. And we have also to say that the economic situation that is prevailing in Senegal is quite similar to many other African countries. So I think that for the external validity of the findings, this is something which is important. So in fact, what the key objectives are to gather insight on the dynamics, the trajectories, and the heterogeneity of migration decisions. And one big emphasis is to try to have to try to uncover the causal effect of active labor market policies. And for that, this is why we are going to rely on this particular methodology, which is the randomized control trial. Okay, so something that I also would like to emphasize is that it's not only about the impact on migration intentions, but also on the type of migration intention, and also the emphasis on the impact on irregular migration, because we all know that irregular migration leads to suboptimal outcomes, either for the migrants or for the people at origin and destination. Okay, and we would like also to capture the heterogeneity across individuals about these impacts. So the typical, the main type of intervention that we would like to study is entrepreneurship coaching, and we would like to see to what extent when we provide coaching about different issues related to entrepreneurial activities, how it's going to impact migration aspiration and intentions to irregular migration. So we would like to see to what extent this might lead to a shift from irregular to legal migration, and in fact on the general impact on the migration intention. We would like to see how the results are going to emerge, because we can expect different mechanism and offsetting mechanism. Just to give you an example, we could say that, for instance, by providing this coaching to entrepreneurship, this is going to increase the skills of these potential migrants, and the skills might be also be used at destination, so it can increase their intention to migrate, but at the same time it raises the local opportunities for these potential migrants. So this is the type of offsetting mechanism that can lead to some uncertainty about the result, and this is why we need some sort of empirical studies to see that. Okay, so what we use is a methodology, which is the randomized control trial. So for those who have never heard about that, I mean, this is a methodology that has received a lot of visibility and popularity with the Nobel Prize awards of Esther Duflo, Banerjee, and Michael Kramer a couple of years ago. So the idea is to use, first of all, to use data collected in a baseline survey about more than 1,000 individuals in Dakar. We target a young population, mostly with low level of education, because this is really the type of population which is at stake in these irregular migration. And we collect data before the intervention and after the intervention, so we can do a before and after comparison and see to what extent this intervention in terms of coaching to entrepreneurship is going to matter for the migration intentions. Okay. So about the literature, I'm going to be very quick about the literature because we do not have much time, but there is some literature on information-based interventions, which is some kind of intervention that have low external validity, because basically these are simply, for instance, videos and things like that. So we were a little bit more ambitious, and we wanted to have some evidence about skill-based intervention like coaching to entrepreneurship. So there is a literature that looks at vocational training. Okay, and there is also very limited literature looking at basically the interaction of self-employment and intention to migrate. Okay, so what we do is that we have the baseline survey, and we are going to randomly assign the treatment, and the treatment is coaching to entrepreneurship. I have to say that this is a very ambitious treatment, because what is this type of treatment? This intervention, we use existing programs in Senegal, in Dakar, conducted by an institution which is called DAR, and this institution provides a 1 week coaching to entrepreneurship. So it is an intervention which is very substantial. It means that people that follow this type of program, they have to spend 1 week in this institution, and they receive coaching about any aspect related to entrepreneurship, legal, economic, technical aspect of entrepreneurship. And so this explains partly why we ended up with a seemingly low participation rate. So we assigned more than 900 individuals, and at the end of the day, we have 200 individuals who participated to that program. So we can use this after that to study the impact of this coaching to entrepreneurship. So about the characteristic in the baseline survey, what we have a sample that reflects, the status of this population. So we have a lot of people in the informal sector. We have, sorry. Okay. We have people with low level of education, so this is basically in line with our targeted population. And in fact, for the moment, we have just finished the collection of the data, and we are going to start the statistical work, the econometric work, using this RCT methodology. But we have basically preliminary findings that are, for the moment, only descriptive, but it gives you an idea about the type of findings that we are going to find with the statistical method. So the first thing that you see is that, first of all, we had a lot of people willing to migrate, and this is not very surprising because of this type of population. And in fact, we see that between the baseline survey and the second survey after the invention, there is a general decrease in the intention to migrate, but this decrease is much stronger for those who receive the treatment in terms of coaching to entrepreneurship. This is for the general intention to migrate, and about the intention to immigrate without the legal documents. What they say in Senegal, this is, they say, migration à l'aventure, so without the legal document, irregular migration. We see that this decrease in the intention to migrate irregularly is stronger for those who receive also some coaching to entrepreneurship. So these are, for the moment, the main findings that we are going to refine with the statistical analysis. And what I have presented is not typically the causal estimates that you have from the RCT, because we need this statistical work. We have a flavor of what we can find. I have to emphasize that this analysis, because of this methodology of random assignment to treatment, is internally valid. But I think also my view is that there is also a strong external validity given the nature of the intervention that we conducted. This is not giving a video to people or maybe showing a couple of pictures. It's really receiving a 1 week treatment for this, so it matters a lot. And I think that I'm already done, Tobias. So.
Thank you, Michel. We'll now move from very detailed, very credible analysis of one specific type of intervention to a more macro view, set of different interventions. If I'm not mistaken, over 700 different projects which were implemented under the EUTF over the past years. And so for this, we need a very different methodology. In many regions across the Horn of Africa, the Sahel, Lake Chad, and at the north of Africa, in one specific province, department, it's on multiple different interventions, maybe entrepreneurial coaching, maybe things to improve the resilience of communities, and so on, were implemented at the same time. So the way we study this cannot be with a randomized control trial, but with an alternative method. And the research question we pursued, I'll tell you about the method in a moment. Research question we pursued in particular is is up here. What was the effect of EUTF on migration aspirations? And then matters because we know it's a leading indicator of migration and also irregular migration. And when we're looking at across 20 different partner countries, and the broader question it speaks to, and where Michel's and the colleagues' works is also providing evidence, is to what extent can development-oriented policies, foreign aid, make a difference in addressing root causes of migration, irregular migration. So how do we approach this question? For the experts of you, the answer is simple. It's a staggered difference in difference approach. For the non-experts who don't do a master's or PhD in economics, what we do is we have well over 100 different provinces across the northern part of Africa, northern and center part of Africa. And over time, so it's a time dimension, you can think of migration aspirations and other indicators moving around. These regions are not identical. They will have different levels of migration aspirations that we need to be aware. Now, what EUTF did was, in any specific province, we know the quarter of the year since beginning of 2016, when EUTF activity started, when the first projects came in. And now we statistically align all of these provinces and say, what happens to the overall situation in that province the moment EUTF starts? Some of the regions or some of these provinces will have had the first project in Q4 2017, some in Q1 2020, others in Q3 2016. So we align all of these to one starting date, and then account statistically for the starting differences between these, and from the differences between the regions, arrive at an estimate of what is going on. We use as a primary outcome survey data from over 600,000 respondents, not done by ourselves, but by Gallup. You can also use Afrobarometer and other such surveys for this. And crucially, as an input data, we got access to project data from the EUTF's monitoring and learning system, something I have to thank again our colleagues for. So we go in detailed project information for internal purposes that we could extract and then use for this study. So this is the probably most important graph that's in the paper that we submitted late last year to the EU Commission as a project deliverable. Here's the point in time when EUTF projects start. This is migration intentions in percentage points, same scale as in Michel's presentation earlier. Minus 0.5 means 5 percentage points fewer people have migration intentions. What you see is that there seems to be something going on after the start of projects on average. Something, as an economist, I don't like is this trend going up and down a little bit. Might mean that there's anticipation of people that soon something will start. There's something odd about the way EUTF shows certain breakdowns and so on. But this result that migration intentions decreased by something around 3 to 5 percentage points across all of these regions in Africa. That's something that holds with all sorts of different robustness checks that we run, different estimation methods. And if you think about migration, the large number of especially young people across all of these 20 countries, over 20 countries, if you decrease their migration intentions by 5 percentage points, 3 percentage points, that's millions of people who in turn to switch from I would like to live elsewhere to I see my future in this country. Yeah? So it's a large effect, although 3% doesn't sound like it. So as telling you, we used the past month to run all sorts of different estimation methods, and depending on how you exactly specify it, you find little longer lasting effects. You find effects come in typically after 3 to 5 years. In some cases, like in the previous graph, you have this uptick here, which is explained partly by COVID and by the fact that we're now at this point, there's no data anymore. since that 7 years out. So I'm quite confident now, after spending more time with this, that EUTF has this aggregate effect that we can really go out with and tell the world about. And like many other development policies, effects only come in after a while, once things are implemented. So for example, once the trainers for trainings have been trained and the program is running, once infrastructure has built, and so on. What is important is these aggregates mask heterogeneity, and that's something we're still in the process of working on. Over time, the composition of what's implemented by EUTF has changed. As you can see here, different categories of projects have changed in their layout. You can take apart also how the effects were for different cohorts. And what we see is that there's relatively sort of zero line, you can't see it up here. For the earlier years, when we had now a couple of years of data starting at 2017, 2016, this trend helps. The cohort 2018 was heavily hit by COVID. So this is something we still study, and we'll see how far we can go with really also providing evidence on which of these elements work best. Very likely you need to bring in additional research also for some of these, like the work Michel was talking about. What are the mechanisms that come out? One, which is very clear, is on improving what we call in economics amenities, public service infrastructure, and so on. So this is one graph from the paper where you have a composite index of what people feel about the basic amenities in their community, where once this starts, there's a very clear uptick in satisfaction with these services. Quite clear evidence of the fact that EUTF achieved improvements there, and as previous research was established in economics that this matters for migration decisions. We also see that perceived living conditions, satisfaction with living conditions improved, and then during COVID, of course, went very negatively and seems to be recovering later on. So what are policy implications? Of course, with ongoing work, we have to be a bit cautious, but it's not that we just started doing this work. We can also rely on research of others, and triangulating between our own results and that of others, a couple of things can be drawn. One is there is now more and more evidence that improving living conditions really makes a difference for migration aspirations. That would mean development policy is a legitimate tool in our migration policy toolkit. Improving conditions at origin and border security are complementary. We shouldn't think of just this very simplistic migration harm argument that by improving people's lives in the origin country, you're making your life harder in terms of deterrence. It's more complex than that. And individuals' migration aspirations are malleable. They can be changed if interventions are well designed, and we should continuously use resources like the monitoring and learning system of EUTF and of other interventions to learn more about what works exactly, why it works, and so on. So it's great to have had the access to the data. For EUTF, we find stronger evidence with all the things one has to keep careful about, individual can study, that improving amenities has worked than for example, the effect of education programs. And my take on this would be that if you're working in very challenging economic circumstances, then it may not be enough to teach people. There also needs to be complementary policies in place. People need to have access to capital and so on for example, entrepreneurship training to play a role. But Michel's study will be much more detailed on these kinds of things. So development policy that improves economic conditions is important, but very clearly many of the policies that have to be in place are decided by the governments of origin countries. And that's something that I am at least missing a lot in the European policy debates right now. That should be takeaway from today. And for me, also having worked for years on attitudes towards migration policy, development policy, and so on, marketing this as part of the strategy to voters is likely to up, because in both migration policy and also in policy of foreign aid, voters are saying there's a lack of strategy in this. Right. With that, we're eager to hear about your question.
Right. Just before we move to question, we've also invited Mr. Javier Fernandez Admetlla. He's the EUTF Horn of Africa manager. Please come on stage to be a discussant for the session, because Javier is managing the projects that you were talking about on an aggregate level and similar to those that Michel talked about. But thanks a lot.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to be rude. It was just in the flow of presenting.
Thank you very much. And thank you to both presenters today. Indeed, I am the new trust fund manager for the Horn of Africa window of the trust fund. The trust fund will be coming to an end in terms of the operations or implementation of projects at the end of this year. So we are now in a situation where there's increasingly less and less to manage as trust fund manager. But it is interesting because it's been 10 years and it's a very sizable fund for, as you said, 5 billion euros. And now we're beginning to see a lot of products that incorporate lessons learned and studies that provide insight and provide insight also at a timely moment, because we're in the process of designing the next MFF, the Global Europe, and all of these elements can be very useful. So I'm going to focus my comments on the study related to the trust fund naturally. But I mean, from our point of view, this is a very welcome and insightful study. And just a few elements that I would like to highlight. The first is that it's quite unique, the fact that it's an empirical study, whereas a lot of the work that we have done is more qualitative. So this brings a level of robustness to the work that has been done. So that's certainly something that we want to build on. Secondly, I think it's also a validation of the approach to transparency in the data and being rigorous in terms of measuring interventions. So this is a substantial work that the trust fund did by creating 38 common output indicators that reported regularly on the impact of the trust fund, and that was one of the pieces that was used in carrying out this study. And we would not have this kind of insight if we had not made that effort in terms of data, which is sometimes something that is a bit not given the importance it should have. I think most importantly, there's the result of this 3 to 5% reduction in the aspirations to migrate, which to a certain degree showed that the trust fund, the work that the trust fund did was useful. I think this is not a reason for complacency and not to seek elements that can be improved, but the fact that as I understand it, particularly on the resilience work, this was very much linked to a reduction in aspirations, is something that very much matches one of the objectives of the trust fund, which was the combating irregular migration. So thank you. I want to perhaps take advantage that I have the floor and ask a question. and it's perhaps to ask where can we take this from here, and this is alluded to in the draft of the paper that I was lucky to have access to. But could you tell us a bit about whether something can be done in terms of linking the results of aspirations to actual reality of migration, and perhaps even is there a way to disaggregate the reality of migration between regular and irregular, because that would kind of establish an additional link and make the results even stronger. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much also for the nice words. We indeed worked a little bit on that element. The nice thing about the strategy, the results that I focused on, is with lots of different subnational regions, you have a fairly large sample to work with. We're down to a little over 20 different countries, and that's a fairly low number of observations. And you use what's called statistical power, so to distinguish really between what's going on in different countries. Within a country, you have the same national policies, for example. So it's much more credible results, much smaller confidence intervals in these graphs. So the problem is once you move to bilateral migration flows between countries, as no subnational migration data for Africa and Europe exists, you lose a lot of statistical power, and then it's not clear whether results are just by chance or are really robust. So that's a bit of a grain of salt on applying this to actual migration. What I found with colleagues in a project where we studied World Bank aid, so aid which was not designed for migration, to target migration aspirations and migration, and which could be expected to maybe have less of an effect on needs. Despite that, we found that irregular migration is reduced in places which received World Bank aid, and after a while, after 5 years or so, regular migration from these places increases a lot. So people are channeled to some extent into more regular channels. I would expect because it's not the same people, but some people gain opportunities and can then migrate regularly, while others are discouraged from migrating irregularly. And that would be also in line with other research done by colleagues in especially economics and political science.